Hey, we'll go ahead and get started. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm over here at the extension office here today, and want to welcome everybody here to this morning's meeting. I got a few announcements, and we'll get started here in just a second. But first, I need to tell you a couple of things. One is next week, spring break for me, and so I'm trying to catch up on a lot of paperwork. And one of the things I need to do is to send out notice for those folks from last year who may not have put in all their hours or had 0 hours. You'll probably get an email. If I get to it, you might even get a letter if I can get that going too. Just want to let you know that you know, for some people, I don't know if they're still part of the program or not. It's sort of this kind of cleaning up house. So it's also real important to make sure you put your hours in. It lets us know that you're active, and also, hopefully you'll meet our minimum of 20 hours for each year. And sometimes people get behind or things come up. Got a few, things from folks, but we're going to try to work it next year to let people know, really encourage you to make sure that you put your hours in by the end of the year. So we're going to try to work on that and try to make sure that everybody who is a master gardener is doing their best to get make that commitment. The next thing is, many of you may know, if you may not know, that Sean has left. Her last day, I think, was February 22nd. Her boyfriend got a job down in Florida. It kind of came up real quick. It's an opportunity, they were looking to do for some time. So Miss Sean, she was great. She helped me tremendously, and I think the organization as a whole. She moved us a lot more into doing things electronically, getting organized, and it's too bad she had to go when she did, because I was still learning lots from her. So anyway, she'll be missed. And one of the things she helped us to get started on, and we're trying to encourage you to. Oh, I'm gonna have to say, I'm gonna say ignore. I'm in the phone room over here, so I'm getting phone calls over here. Is to make sure that you use signup.com. If you're not familiar with signup.com, you can talk to some folks on the board. You can talk to me, but I'm probably not going to be. Many of the other people in here, Ann and others, and Renew and others, and Danielle and others, know probably much more than I do about sign up. But we chose to use signup.com to make sure when we have guys sign up, and it's a fair and equitable way for people to sign up with Master Gardener activities. And I really, really encourage you to use that. And next thing I gotta tell you about is monthly meetings. I was hoping to have the March monthly meeting face-to-face, but unfortunately, a few months back, I was told that they can't have any meetings till face-to-face over the fairgrounds till after June, because there's some type of water leak over there. So next year, try to have the March meeting face-to-face, but we'll have our next opportunity for us to get together face-to-face is on June 6th, and that's going to be our summer social. Sometimes we call it that. And that will be at the extension office. In September, I plan to have a meeting over at the fairgrounds at face-to-face. And of course, our holiday parties face-to-face over at the fairgrounds as well. But this is a change. And I was talking to Renew, and Ryan notified me this. The fall conference usually will be the first Thursday in October, but we're moving it to the second Thursday in October because there's a holiday on the first Thursday. And I made the call, and I thought it'd be most, there's ups and downs, keep it where it was, whatever. But I thought it'd be a good idea to move it to the second Thursday. It's going to be on October 10th. That's the fall conference. So there's a change on that. Renew's already on it. I think she's already updated us on the website. Since I'm at the extension office today, maybe not during the meeting, I want you to listen to Thomas Fazio, of course, but if you want to come by and pick up your marketing materials that Linda and others have organized, I'm here probably till 3 o'clock today. I will also be here on Monday from about noon to 3 over here at the extension office. And the other thing, another day I can promise you I'll be here is for our board meeting. I'm going to do a hybrid board meeting. I'm going to bring out the owl. Some people know what the owl is. It's our little conference projector. And if you're around that day, I'll probably be there pretty much all day from about 9:30 to 3 o'clock. If you want to pick up your marketing materials. And Sean's, I'm not sure when she's going to the posting for her, try to find a new person to replace Sean and Linda. Of course, I think still Linda. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. There might be somebody for an interim. So there's going to be a period of time where I'm going to try to do my best to man the sort of helm here. And that includes one of the new things I'm learning how to do is that's procurement. So I've just got what I call a purchase card. Apparently it's in the mail. It's going to be delivered to me soon. So I'm going to try to figure that out. I know I'm getting some help here in the office, ordering some items that you feel are critical from Sheila. Got a couple things delivered here in the office today already. And there's a couple over to be picked up at some at Home Depot. But if you can hold off until I get this kind of worked out, or sort of a little slow, pause down so I can get this procurement thing under my belt. And the other thing I have to do is get what's called a T card. And the T card's a little different from a P card. Maryland comes up with these names: P card, T card. The T card goes like this: if you want to buy any food or refreshments for any kind of event here or at your place, or say event we're going to have like at Terry Valenti's others, we're going to have an event and over there at the fairgrounds, anything like that, I have to use this thing called a T card, and I still got to get that. So there's a whole new procurement system here. It's going to take a little time to get adjusted, and I appreciate your patience on that till we get this all kind of settled and ironed out. So that's my quick rundown of announcements. We just have one more, and that is happy to tell you about. We've got a good crew of folks over here who are manning and getting organized in a composting system, which our speaker is going to talk about a little bit, probably, I'm sure. But we're going to have a couple of slides coming here from Matt Bates, talk about our composting system that we got a grant to put in. And I'll let Matt tell you more about that. We're looking for folks to help do a couple things with that, to do training to the public. There's going to be an opportunity to take an online composting training course for free, I think, right, Matt? And if you take that, that'll help you tremendously to help provide education to the public about composting in general and the type of composting system that we have here. It's kind of a sophisticated system. It's called an OX system. And Matt, I probably should let you take it from here if that's okay. I think Matt's there. I see some slides moving around.
Matt, can you turn your unmute yourself?
Oh, yep. Come right
There you go.
Yeah. Are you good with that, Matt? I don't know if you want to put it up. There you go.
All right, we good?
That'll work, Matt. I think you can work with that.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. Sorry for that. Yeah, I'm Matt Bates. I'm one of two volunteers who's been working at the compost in the compost area at the Durwood demonstration garden. And with the help of the Institute for Local Self-Reliance and Eco City Farms, we've installed a new active aeration 3-bin composter at the DDG, which is, and you can see it here. The new system uses forced air to move air up and through the compost pile. And the increased flow of oxygen accelerates the rate of decomposition. It allows the system to produce much larger volumes of compost more quickly than the passive aerated systems that and compost heaps that most of us have in our own backyards. So the more rapid decomposition also produces higher temperatures inside the pile. And the new system will reach sustained temperatures of 131 degrees Fahrenheit and higher, which is sufficient to kill most pathogens and pathogens in most seeds. We'll be able to compost food scraps, no meat, but food scraps, along with the normal mixture of greens and browns, such as garden waste and lawn trimmings, shredded sticks and leaves. The compost area at the DDG is also being rechristened as the Compost Education Hub, where county residents and community groups can come to learn about composting and how to do it on their own. You can see the new system on the left of that slide, and right next to our old traditional passively aerated bins. We'll be demonstrating how to use those in single bin systems and other composting methods, tumblers as well, that kind of thing. Long story short, we're going to be doing a lot more up at that area, and we need 2 more volunteers, in addition to the volunteers who already responded to the call for volunteers in the seed. If we get more than 2 people, we'll set up a waiting list. Anyone interested should contact the email address at the bottom, Leslie Ann Furlong, who is my fellow composter at the Durwood Demonstration Garden. Volunteers will receive online training, which will qualify for continuing ed credits, as well as in-person training, and also a guaranteed spot in the first Master Composter class that was announced in the recent issue of the Seed as well. So we're excited. It's going to be a lot of work, and we hope if you're interested, please do volunteer and email Leslie at the email address on the slide. I look forward to hearing from you. And that's it.
Thank you, Matt. I think we're over to our president, Renew.
Good morning, everyone. Just wishing you a warm welcome to our March monthly meeting. I have a couple of guest announcements or guest announcers. So let me turn the virtual mic over to Gloria, who can complete our monthly recognitions. Gloria, over to you.
Thank you, Renee. Good morning, everyone. And I'll wait till my slides come up to start with those. But this month we'll be recognizing several of our task forces. Task forces are established for specific duties and activities. And because it's only March, some task forces will not be acknowledged today because their activities and duties will occur later in the year. So just to be aware of that. We're continuing to introduce our interns as they complete their 40 volunteer hours and have earned their master degree badges. So today, we will welcome Cindy Steele, Elizabeth Payne, David Colachico, and Ella Truelove. And all of these people are from the class of 2023. Now, we already acknowledged, they are already working as master gardeners in many capacities. And if you are a recent intern turned master gardener after earning your 40 hours, let your class representative, Chris Cotter, know that so that we can introduce you in a future recognition. And we look forward to getting to know all these new master gardeners and working with them for a long time. So congratulations and welcome. Next slide, please. Oh, this is the website and multimedia task force. Willie Bonilla is being recognized today for producing, and that means reviewing, editing, captioning, and publishing the video and audio for 10 recorded replays of our monthly meetings. And that includes speaker presentations. Additionally, during the summer months of 2023, Willie produced over 15 intern training class video replays. And that was for the benefit of our incoming master gardeners. And I know they all appreciated that, Willie. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. And now the volunteer management system known to us as VMS. And that's headed by and run by Katie Mackay. She's an outstanding support to all master gardeners. As you know, Katie enters our volunteer hours and education hours on the VMS and updates the directory. She reminds us of what codes to use and informs us when changes occur. Katie has managed this system since 2011, when master gardeners entered their hours on paper, known as green sheets. And many of you will remember that system, I'm sure. Katie would go to Durwood to collect the green sheets and then use a computer there to enter the hours. Now, in 2013, the VMS went online with the system that we now have. And through it all, even the recent injuries that she's had, Katie has managed this alone and with great expertise. And we thank you very much, Katie, and continue to wish you well. Next slide, please. Garden educators, headed by Pam Hossamer and Carol Kosery. They are the Garden Educator Task Force co-chairs, and they proudly acknowledge the following garden educators. And please take a look at the list. They're listed in alphabetical order by first names. These are the first volunteers of our new garden educators. The goal will be to educate the public on sustainable garden practices and protecting the environment through showcase tours of our various demo gardens. The first focus for this new role was supporting Pam Hossamer, who's master gardener and also an education SNAP Ed educator. Pam's Head Start and first grade students toured the Durwood Demo Garden in May and September of 2023. So next slide, please. Continuing with garden educators, Leonard Kentz was one of those who helped set up the stations the day before the children came, and showing master gardeners who were volunteering for the first time how to give the garden tours. Leonard went above and beyond, providing the soils and containers for the soil station, making sure everything was ready before the students arrived. He was great with the kids. And here we see him engaged with two students checking out the pond. And to quote a fellow volunteer, he was just an all-around enthusiastic guy. So thank you, Leonard. Next slide, please. The last slide is our awards task force. And this group is responsible for sharing the guidelines for the Master Gardener Lifetime Achievement and the Outstanding Service Awards. They request nominations, receive them, review the nominee qualifications, and present the nominees to the board for approval. Awards are then presented during the holiday party in December. Task force members bring different perspectives to the task, as they are from many different years of experience. And here you see pictured Joe Ginther, Michael Pariser, our chair, Linda Barrett, Ken Hoyle, and Gloria Mitchell. And thanks to all the task forces, those seen today and others that we'll hear about later, thanks to all the task forces who serve in so many capacities to help our Master Gardener organization function, and to Steve Dubik, our Master Gardener coordinator, who oversees them all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks tech team for unmuting me. I wanted to provide an invitation to now Judy Rosenthal to provide an update on the food forest. Judy, over to you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, and thank you also to the board and to just Master Gardeners for being willing to make this into an activity for Master Gardeners. We're very excited about it. So the the Food Forest Project is currently supporting 2 different projects right now, one at the Montgomery College site in Tacoma Park, which is this first slide, I think. That is it shown? You have the slides up? Yeah, so that's right on East-West Highway. And so we have 7 designers who have designed different sections of it. It's over half an acre, I think. And this weekend, we have a big work day, Saturday and Sunday, where we'll be laying out all the mulch and the wood chips to prepare the beds and doing a lot of soil prep. So the way Master Gardeners will be involved in these projects will be working with the volunteers and being the people who explain to everyone what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and sharing some information. We have a whole list of talking points about soil prep that they can share. The other site is, the next slide, is the Tacoma Park Elementary School. We started this one last year. We built those 3 raised beds, and we activated their garden club with their kids at the school. It's a K through 2nd grade school. And so we'll be working there as well. In addition, another Master Gardener opportunity here is they have the Kids Garden Club, which has expanded from 1 group of 25 kids to 3 groups, because we're going to now have one for each age group, each grade level. It's going to be Wednesdays, April 10th through May 29th, after school from 4 to 5:30. So that's another way Master Gardeners can help out with that. There'll be 2 teachers in each group, and the Master Gardeners will be co-teachers along with them. So if anyone's interested in that, you can be in touch with me about that. The picture on the right is the layout of the design for the food forest that's going to be installed there. It's around the perimeter of the playground. It's all very exciting because some of the trees are being put in by MCPS on the right-hand side. And then we're working on getting the rest of them to be doing them. And then the next slide is, so this is the information for this coming weekend. It's Saturday and Sunday from 10 till 1. We'll be at the college, which is basically, the address is 7600 Tacoma Avenue, but it's literally the corner of East-West Highway, which is Route 410, and Chicago Avenue. We're literally right across the street from the park that's there. So anybody who's interested in joining us, please come. We'll be very busy doing a lot of work there. And we had 20 people at the elementary school last week, 20 volunteers from the community. So we're anticipating a bunch of people this weekend as well. So.
Thanks so much, Judy. And what a wonderful opportunity for us to volunteer, and a great cause. So I'll briefly move through the last few announcements. I've got announcements from the Speakers Bureau, and also announcements regarding plant clinic signups and the Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage Tour. So let me run through those quickly. The first is in regards to the Speakers Bureau. The Speakers Bureau is actually recruiting for a couple of different positions. The first is in regards to a scheduler's role. So just as background, the Speakers Bureau helps to fulfill our mission by facilitating the presentation of talks given by our members to the Montgomery County community. We're currently recruiting volunteers to join our scheduling team, which involves receiving incoming requests for talks, matching the requests with suitable talks in our catalogue, and supporting clear communication between the requesters, the speakers, and collecting follow-up information. It's an important remote job, which can be customised to fit around your personal schedule. If you're interested, please contact the Speakers Bureau co-chairs, Cindy Langstaff or Deborah Kleinberg, and we'll put their contact details or their names in our written announcements. The second announcement for the Speakers Bureau is a recruitment notice for speakers. So if you're interested in volunteering as a speaker to make presentations throughout the county, this is the one for you. Presentations are done by Zoom and in person, and it's an engaging and impactful way to assist our community and share your knowledge. You earn credit for hours creating talks and presenting talks, and there may be opportunities for master gardeners to collaborate and develop and present talks together. Extensive support is provided for selecting a topic and throughout the presentation development process. Again, contact co-chairs Cindy Langstaff or Deborah Kleinberg if you would like more information. The second announcement is for plant clinics and urban garden signups. Exciting. All master gardeners and interns would have seen through our Groups.io messages that volunteer spots at all of our 12 plant clinics as well as urban gardening is now open. If you will indulge me, I could actually share my screen and show, okay, maybe Steve can let me share my screen, but I could show you just in 30 seconds how to get to the sign up and what it will look like. It's a very simple process, and it's a way that we're piloting, if you like, with the plant clinics and urban gardening to be able to share a easy to use sign up platform. Steve, is it possible to allow me to share my screen? Okay, I don't know that Steve's available. Unless the tech team can let me do that, I will just move along. Okay, so look, there's a lot of resources available. If you have any challenges once you click through the link, then please get in contact with the plant clinic coordinators or of course the webmaster team, of which I'm one of the webmasters. So signups are a way you'll see on the screen, you will know if the plant clinic is full, if we're still looking for volunteers, is there intern slots or experienced master gardener slots. And also there are sometimes some extra requirements, such as at Brookside, you need to have some extra requirements to volunteer at that location. So all those details are really housed in signup.com. The way you find that sign up sheet is in the exact same page on the website, which I will place the link into the chat after I complete the announcements today.
Renu, try sharing your screen again.
Yeah, let me do that. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Chuck. So let me see when you can see my screen. That looks good. Chuck, are you able to see my screen? That's okay.
Yes.
You can?
No, do
No.
it one more time.
Try
We
again?
had it
Okay.
and then lost it.
Okay, let me
Try it again.
Yep.
There we go.
Awesome. Okay. So this is our home page. So just to navigate you could either click down, click down to For Master Gardeners and then volunteer opportunities, or you can get there from the home page. So quick tour under contributing, volunteer opportunities, same page. This is a list of all our volunteer opportunities. But if you scroll down to in-person plant clinics or urban gardening, the links in here will take you straight in. So if I wanted to volunteer near my home location, which is near Germantown, I would click into Germantown. You go straight into signup.com and you can see the different dates that are open and what positions are open. And you can even see who's signed up before you, or who you'll be working with that day. So hopefully that opportunity to share my screen just gives you a bit of comfort about how easy it is to sign up. Of course, as I said, speak with any of the plant clinic coordinators if you need more information. So, and sorry, one more thing. Not all volunteer opportunities are using signup.com. It is just for the plant clinics at this point and urban gardening. So we'll be looking for feedback and looking to potentially expand that in the near future, but not to be disruptive to our upcoming events. Okay, So final announcement for me is the 2024 Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage Tour. So founded in 1937, the Maryland House and Garden Pilgrimage Tours provide funding for historic preservation across the state of Maryland. In 2024, in honor of Scotland AME Zion Church's 100th anniversary, the pilgrimage will come to Potomac, Maryland, and will be hosted by the Scotland community. The ticket includes access to 11 properties, including the oldest house in Montgomery County, the oldest house in Potomac Village, as well as Glenstone Museum and 8 other properties. If you're interested, please take a look at the March written minutes for more details and the website. So with that, I will wrap up the announcements. Thanks for indulging our rather long list of announcements, but we are at the start of the growing season and volunteering season, so appreciate your patience. So with that, I will hand the virtual mic over to Linda, and thank you for covering for me last month as well.
Morning, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Thomas Fazio works as the compost manager at the Eco City Farms in Prince George's County, Maryland. His responsibilities at Eco include managing their aerated static pile and vermicomposting systems. Prior to working with Eco, Thomas was a manager at Compost Crew. While at Compost Crew, he worked on Compost Crew's first compost outpost installation at 1 Acre Farm in Dickerson, Maryland. His experience is in community-based on-farm composting using food scraps as the primary input. Thomas is certified as a compost facility operator with the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And so I want to welcome him this morning, and I know you're going to find his presentation very interesting. So welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks to Steve for the invitation to speak at this month's Master Garden meeting. It is sort of it's very nice to be asked to speak at these events, and so I'm really excited to share with you all the composting work that we do at Eco City Farms. So before we get started talking about the composting work that we do at Eco, I want to talk about really sort of general basic definition of what is compost, talk about the core principles that go into making a good composting pile. And then I will spend some time talking about our composting that we do at Eco City Farms. And then I want to leave some time at the end for questions. And I know that there was already some discussion about the new Durwood site, but if there are questions and discussion about the Durwood site, I'd like to leave some time at the end to discuss that. Now, I haven't been very involved in that project, so if others who have more information on the ins and outs of how that will be run would like to sort of step in at that point, I'd be happy to hand the microphone over to others. So without further ado, what is compost? So, very generally speaking, compost is the controlled transformation of raw natural inputs or feedstocks into a valuable soil amendment. And this process is being done by aerobic microorganisms. Compost can be done in many different ways, on many different scales, with many different inputs. But every compost pile sort of follows the same core principles or utilizes the same core principles, whether it's a 3-bin system or a large municipal site that's processing leaves or something in between. There are some core principles that are relevant for every compost pile. And so I want to discuss what those core principles are. And then I will relate those core principles to the work that is done at Eco. But again, these are principles that are going to be relevant to folks volunteering at the Durwood site, or if you are making compost in your backyard, in your back garden, these are going to be relevant principles. And so these have been, taught to me by my mentor, a man named Benny Erez, who I'm sure some of you on the call have met and are, who know who that man is. He is no longer at EcoCity. He retired. But he is the one who taught me these principles that I will be sharing with you today. And these are principles that I've learned from now years and years of making compost piles, which I'm happy to share with you all. So the first part of making a successful compost pile is creating a good compost recipe. So your raw inputs that go into your compost pile are typically going to be divided into two different categories. I'm sure many folks are familiar with this and have heard about this, but you're going to have your green feedstocks and your brown feedstocks. Now, what your green feedstocks means is that they have a lower carbon to nitrogen ratio, meaning there's more available nitrogen for those microorganisms. And your brown feedstocks are going to have a higher carbon to nitrogen ratio. And so these are some common inputs. Actually, these are the inputs that we use at our operation that are pretty common, I would say, in our area of composting. So urban, suburban compost piles tend to be made up of these inputs. There's obviously going to be different inputs that are included as well, which are totally okay. But these are the sort of the most common that we'll find in sort of our neck of the woods, so to speak. So once you've determined what is available, right, then you need to figure out the appropriate recipe for your mix. A lot of people are familiar with sort of the 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 browns to greens recipe. But what's not often talked about, what's not often discussed when talking about a compost recipe is the elemental or the carbon to nitrogen ratio on an elemental ratio. And that needs to start at a 30-to-1 ratio. So the 3-to-1 ratio that is often talked about and blogged about and you can read about online is talking about the volumetric ratio. How many parts of browns to how many parts of greens. And usually that has been determined by the relationship of carbon to nitrogen on the elemental ratio or at the microscopic ratio. And in order to figure out what the appropriate recipe is based on the feedstocks that you have, there are calculators available that can actually help you make that determination. I have linked here to a website called Urban Worm Company, I'm sorry, and they have a really good calculator where you can type in your inputs. They will tell you, you're typing in your inputs based on the volume, and they're going to tell you the elemental carbon to nitrogen ratio. And you're trying to get it to be around 30-to-1 to start. But, and most times if you're adding wood chips or other sort of high carbon inputs, cardboard or things like that, it is going to be a little bit higher than 30-to-1. But the reality, you want to stick to 30-to-1 as much as possible. And there are calculators online that can help you get there. And then once you've determined what the appropriate mix is, that's when you are using your measuring device, whether it be a 5-gallon bucket, a wheelbarrow, or in our case, the bucket of a skid loader. That is what you're using to actually create your mix. So that's the difference between the elemental ratio and the volumetric ratio. So another thing that's really important in making a functioning, compost pile that's going to break down and decompose is ensuring that compost pile has adequate moisture content. I think this is one of the most overlooked parts of making a compost pile is inadequate moisture content. Typically, when folks are having issues with material breaking down, it's taken a lot longer than they expected to. It has to do with their pile not having enough moisture. But it can also be the flip side. I mean, we've seen piles where, if left outside under the elements where they can get direct rain in the event of a big storm, piles can get too much moisture. And then that will lead to sort of the pile going anaerobic. So what is talked about and what is taught is 60% moisture content. Now, it's pretty difficult to know exactly what your moisture content is in the pile down to the percentage. There are hydrometers out there and things like that that you can get, but those are not always accurate. And so what we do when we are making a mix is we will actually grab the mix with our hands, squeeze it, do a squeeze test. If a lot of water is running down, that means you've added too much water. You may need to mix it up a couple more times, maybe you need to add some drier inputs, sort of dry it out a little bit. If you're squeezing and you're not feeling moisture and there's no moisture beating between your fingers, then the pile doesn't have enough moisture. If you squeeze and there's a little bit of moisture coming between your fingers, then your pile has hit the sweet spot and it has good moisture content. And this is really common now. Pretty much every composter that I've talked to does one version of the squeeze test to figure out if their pile has enough moisture content. So another thing that I want to mention when I talk about moisture is that when you are building a pile, when you're creating a pile, that is the time when you want to add moisture to your pile. You can add moisture through on top of the pile by watering it on top, but it's not as successful as if you are adding it while you are mixing the material. And so we add the water while we mix the material. And if you are worried about whether or not you have enough moisture, it's always better to, I think, to add a little bit more moisture, because that moisture, the pile is going to dry out over time, especially once the weather warms up and you're pumping air into the pile. So better to add a little bit more than not enough. But I want to stress the importance of keeping the pile covered, making sure it's not getting direct rainfall on it, and sort of monitoring those moisture levels is really important. And then, so that's sort of the first part of making the pile. What do you have available? What is your recipe? How much moisture are you adding to the pile? And then you're talking about, okay, how big is this pile going to be? Now, at the Durwood site, for example, that pile is going to be basically the same dimensions every time. And those bins were built because they are the adequate size for that pile to trap heat and for those microorganisms to really do the work of breaking that material down. So 4x4 is a really good dimensions for a compost pile. But you can make compost piles that are bigger, and I'm sure folks have seen compost piles that are much bigger than 4x4. But you want to be careful about making pile sizes that are not too big. So 4x4 is really, I think you can get away with maybe 3 feet by 3 feet. That should get some pretty good heat generated. 4 feet by 4 feet is really good. And you don't want to make a pile that's too big. And this is especially important when you have nitrogen-rich inputs. So if you're composting manure or food scraps, grass clippings, something like that, that's going to generate a lot of microbial activity, what can happen is that your piles can overheat and go anaerobic if they're too large. So one of the things that I was taught was that you really don't want the pile to be any more than about 10 feet wide and 6 feet high. I asterisk this because it does depend on the inputs, and this is we're talking about food scrap composting because that's sort of my realm. This would be different if you were just composting, let's say, brush clippings or leaves. Those piles, you can get away with bigger piles in that sense. But when you're talking about high nitrogen inputs, you want to make sure your pile's not getting too big. But the importance of the pile size, again, is to trap the heat that's being generated by the microorganisms who are breaking that material down, to accelerate decomposition, and also to make sure that your pile is hitting important benchmarks when it comes to temperature, which we'll talk about. And then there's aeration. So you've determined your feedstock mix, you know what your recipe is, you're mixing the pile, you've added it into maybe it's a container or it's a windrow or it's something that's a sort of a contained system to hold that mixture. Then you need to think about, how am I going to make sure that enough oxygen is passing through this pile in order to give those microorganisms oxygen so that they continue to be active. You do not want to have compost piles that are anaerobic for prolonged periods of time. Compost piles will go anaerobic, and that's okay. You just don't want that to happen very often. You want to cultivate aerobic microbes. You want those aerobic microbes to outnumber any anaerobic that are in the pile. And you can push air into your piles a couple of different ways. At the Durwood site, the bins were installed with pipes underneath of the bins that are attached to air blowers that will routinely push air through the pile. Those blowers will be turned on for a certain period of time, usually about 15, 20 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer, so that there's sufficient airflow that passes through the pile. If you don't have blowers and you're not pushing air through the pile in sort of a passive system, then you have to introduce oxygen into your pile by either using a pitchfork or a shovel or a machine, whether it be a skid loader or some sort of heavy machinery that is able to lift and turn that pile. And doing that at regular intervals is important, again, because you want to make sure that you're cultivating aerobic microorganisms. Because it's the aerobic microorganisms that are the beneficial microorganisms in the end product that you're going to be using as a soil amendment. Oh, and then just really quick talking about how air is passing through a pile. So the reason why blowers are a really good way of passing air through the pile is that there already is going to be some element of passive aeration, air sort of coming in through the bottom of the pile and filtering out through the top of the pile. Passive aeration is basically just pushing more oxygen through the pile. And that's what these arrows are meant to show, that there is movement of gases, of air that is passing through the pile. All right. So I think that I've identified moisture and time as sort of the two most overlooked parts of making a productive compost pile. In addition to inadequate moisture content, which we see a lot, I think that folks try to make compost faster than it is actually ready. A finished compost should not have any thermophilic activity in its core. So if you are ordering compost and it arrives and you put your hand in that finished compost pile and it's hot, and you stick a thermometer in there and it's 120 degrees or something like that, that pile is not finished. That pile is not ready. And if you apply compost that's still in its thermophilic process into the soil to grow plants, then that can actually have a detrimental impact on your plants, especially younger plants, especially seedlings that you're starting. So it's really important when you're going from your compost pile to your finished black gold that you're using to grow plants to ensure that that compost has gone through a thermophilic cycle and that the temperature has fallen. I have a graph here showing sort of a very simplified way of how that happens. This would be like the perfect compost pile, which none of them ever are. It's never as linear as sort of cool, hot for a little bit, back to cool, and never gets hot again. There are sort of waves along the line, but I showed this graph to show that this thermophilic phase, the one that I've highlighted in the red, is very important to determine whether a compost has actually, a finished compost has actually gone through a successful composting process. So when you make your mix, it's not going to get hot immediately. It takes a couple days for that pile to really start to generate some heat. It'll start sort of around that ambient temperature. In the winter, it's going to start a lot lower, so it will take a little bit longer to heat up. In the summer, you're starting at a higher place, so it may heat up quicker. The heat that's being generated in the pile is happening from what are called thermophilic microorganisms, essentially microorganisms that like to be in warm, hot conditions. That process can take 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. It could take even longer. But it's the quickest turnaround time that you can go from raw inputs to I'm using this as a soil to grow plants, again, young plants specifically, is 3.5 months. And that is really if you are managing that pile very well, either by turning that pile by hand or there's air that's passing through that pile at regular intervals. So that is really that quickest turnaround time. But the reality is a lot of the piles that we make at the farm, they do not go back to being cool again until about that 5-6 month mark. we're making fairly large piles. So there's material that's going to be not in that core of the pile. And that's why it's important to sort of remix it, because then that material that starts on the outside then goes into the core and then heats up. And so there's a little bit of a longer active time when you're making bigger piles. Moisture is going to be important throughout this whole time that you're making the pile. You want to make sure that really anytime you're going there and disturbing the pile, remixing the pile, opening up the pile, you are adding moisture that will help speed up the decomposition of the compost material. And I mentioned that you're looking for benchmarks when you're making a compost pile. So those temperature benchmarks are going to be 130 or 131 for at least 3 days in an aerated static pile system. Basically what that temperature is doing is it's killing off any potential pathogens that are going to be in your compost pile. Now, if you're composting food scraps, leaves, and wood chips, the hope is that there's no pathogens in there, because if it's coming from food scraps, then there's a bigger problem at hand here, right? But there can always be pathogens, and you just never know. If you hit 131 degrees and it stays there for a consistent time frame, you can rest assured that that is going to kill off any pathogens that can be harmful to humans. That benchmark is incredibly important when you're doing any type of manure compost, which will, actually carry potential pathogens, or may carry potential pathogens that can be harmful to humans. At 150, most seeds that you have put into that pile, so if you're doing food scraps, obviously they're going to come with an abundance of seeds. Around 150, some 155, tomato seeds in particular will die off. So 150, 155, those are your benchmarks for making sure that the seeds in the pile are no longer viable on the back end when you're using that as a soil amendment. But you want to be careful that your pile doesn't get too hot, right? You really don't want a pile that's going to stay above 160 degrees for too long, because that can produce alcohols and things that can be detrimental to plants. So you're really looking for a pile in between, 120, 150 for a few months. And at that stage, this pile has gone through a thorough decomposition. If you mix that pile again and it doesn't reheat, then that's an indication that that material is now stabilized, it is ready for field application, and it's going to be beneficial for plants. Okay, so those are sort of the core principles that I have learned and that we practice at Eco City Farms. And I want to sort of take those core principles and I want to match them with how we make compost at Eco. So I'm sure some of you in this meeting have been to Eco City Farms. I'm sure some of you have had the opportunity to have Benny tour you around, show you the worms. But for those of you who haven't, or even if you have, and things have changed in the last couple of years, I want to give you guys an overview and show you what we do at Eco. And so this is our new site that well, not new anymore, it's 2 years old, where we make our hot compost. This is how it looks from the front. This is a bird's eye view top down of the farm. So the area shaded in gray is the sort of the borders of our farm. The areas highlighted in blue are the areas that we use for hot compost production. And the area that is in pink is the worm house. And historically, the hot compost was done in the worm house, in the pink house. But we got some money from the EPA a couple of years ago by EPA grant to build this system, which I will be talking about today, which is where we make our hot compost piles. Just wanted to point out that we are in Bladensburg, Maryland, in Prince George's County. You see how close we are to the Parkway. Although we have a nice sort of tree area on the top side of our farm, the north side of our farm, we are very much an urban farm. So everything south of our farm is urban or suburban, whatever you want to call it, landscape. So multi-unit buildings, pavement, roads, schools, buildings. We're not in a rural setting here. We are very much an urban farm. This is a view of Benny and myself in front of the first compost pile that was made at our Bladensburg site. in 2022. So these fabricated shipping containers are what we use in our compost process. This was the brainchild of Benny. This was his idea, was to turn shipping containers into bins that would be able to hold and process compost. I worked with Benny to sort of turn that dream into a reality. And as Linda mentioned, I worked on the first installation at the 1 Acre Farm in Dickerson, Maryland. So going into it, or before going into it, just a quick sort of talk on on-farm composting and the benefits of on-farm composting. Really, on-farm composting is a really cool way of looking at the food waste problem that we are being faced with. Food waste should not be going to landfills. It should be going to compost facilities. Farms, a lot of farms are transitioning from traditional conventional practices to trying to adopt organic sustainable practices. So the idea is to try and divert food scraps away from the landfill to farms to create soil amendments that can grow food in an organic way, in a regenerative, sustainable way. And we're lucky in Maryland, thanks to the work of ILSR and others, that there is an exemption as long as you are occupying less than 10,000. It used to be 5,000, now it's 10,000. Again, because of the work of Brenda Platt and others at ILSR. It is now, you do not require a permit as long as you are doing food scrap composting on space that occupies less than 10,000 square feet. So that's a huge boon for on-farm composting. It should help promote more on-farm composting moving forward. All right, so how did the process work? So food scraps arrive at our farm at Bladensburg. We work with Compost Crew, who collects the food scraps from local customers who subscribe to the Compost Crew service. Those food scraps arrive in a truck. That vehicle comes to our site and our concrete mixing pad, which you remember from the image that I showed, the front view of the farm. All food scraps are dumped on an impermeable concrete pad surface. The food scraps arrive in compostable liners. They also have things in there that have been deemed acceptable for commercial compost facilities. At our farm, we do not accept any compostable plastics, including the liners. So those compostable plastics are taken out. They will be put back on that truck the following week and taken to a commercial facility, the one in Upper Marlboro. Also, we want to make sure that there's no garbage in the bins. So unfortunately, when you're picking up food scraps from 200 different households, there's going to be things that get put in that bin that are not compostable. And we've seen, having done this for many years now, you see a lot. And we want to make sure that material that's not organic material is not going into our compost pile. So that's also being filtered out. It's going into a separate bin, which is going to the landfill. So I'm talking about things like regular plastics, aluminum cans, aluminum foil, you name it. Some crazy stuff ends up in bins. So there's a pretty rigorous decontamination process. This is being done by hand. We're going in with gloves, boots, and we're taking that material out. We really, really emphasize, and what we want to do is we want to have a very clean feedstock that's coming in. Because we are using this compost and applying it on our farms, and we want it to be as clean and as safe as possible. So that material is being taken out. I asterisk paper products because some paper products are okay, others are not okay. So we do try to take out a lot of paper products as well. Anything that has a plastic lining on it or has a lot of ink on it, we'll take out. Anything that has like a brown cardboard type feel and look to it should be okay. But another reason why we do take out a lot of paper products is that can change our carbon to nitrogen ratio. If you remember from my previous slide, cardboard has a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 400 to 1. So if we keep an abundance of carbon, a bunch of cardboard in our pile, then we can't really adequately make our compost recipe the way it needs to be made. So our belief, our view, is only food scraps. That's what we would like to receive at our farm. And we are working towards that. And Compost Crew has been a very good partner in helping us get to that point. So the food scraps are decontaminated. It goes from, material that is sort of undesirable to now a desirable pile of cleaned food scraps. At this point, we start to add our brown material. Sometimes what we'll do actually is we'll layer some leaves and wood chips underneath where the food scraps are dumped to kind of have what we call a carbon bed. It's especially helpful if it's rained in the previous weeks and there's water in the back of the truck and it dumps and it's sort of, messy and wet. We'll put some wood chips and some leaves down to sort of soak up that moisture. Also, it helps when we make the mix. But what we'll typically do is add the majority of our carbon feedstock on top of the food scraps, and we will use a machine to do all of this work. So this is the recipe that we use. We may make some tweaks, some alterations to it, but for the most part, we sort of stick to this recipe. When I say 2 parts, 1 part, what that is the bucket of the skid loader, which you'll see in future slides. But for a smaller operation that doesn't have access to a $50,000 skid steer, you can use a bucket, you can use a wheelbarrow, really anything as long as it's going to be the same size, right? So you're using a measuring device, you want it to be consistent. Other things that we will add into our pile that are sort of outside of the traditional browns to greens recipe, we like to add in thermophilic compost. So we like to cycle back compost that has already gone through the thermophilic process. The reason we like to do that is it helps sort of kickstart the process. We're injecting microorganisms into the pile to help the decomposition, help speed up the decomposition of the new sort of virgin material that we're adding into the pile. So we always are adding in some old compost, and I say old, thermophilic compost. Maybe it's 3-4 weeks old. It's not very, very old. It's still going through its hot composting phase. We're going to add that into a new pile. One of the things that Benny was very adamant about and taught me about was adding 5% clay into our pile. So we have clay, some piles of clay on the farm when we do sort of construction or different sort of jobs on the farm that require moving earth. We'll stockpile that clay, and then we'll add a little bit of clay, usually about half a bucket of clay, we'll add into the pile. It helps with the sort of the cation exchange capacity, helps with nutrient uptake from the plants in the pile, or when the finished material is applied to the soil. The other thing that I would like to add more of, but unfortunately we don't actually have a lot of it available, is biochar. And that you would be also adding a small amount, maybe 5% most, but maybe a little bit less. Actually, moving forward, this is a really exciting development. We have a contact at the University of Maryland, and they're interested in studying the effects of using biochar in compost piles. And so actually they're coming out next week, and we're going to talk about maybe ways that they can help us actually get access to biochar so that we can add biochar into our mix. So there's still a lot to be learned about biochar, and that could be a whole separate presentation. I won't go into too much detail on that, but just wanted to say that there are other things in the recipe that we add that sort of fall outside of that browns to greens ratio that we talked about. All right, so I mentioned that we use a machine to do this work. This is the machine that we utilize. This makes it so much easier to do this on the scale that we are doing it at. The piles we are making are pretty large. It would be possible to do it with a group of volunteers, shovels and pitchforks, but the piles that we're making are much larger than a 4x4 3-bin system. So being able to utilize a skid loader, and the skid loader belongs to Compost Crew, they let us use their skid loader to process their food scraps. That's sort of part of the agreement that we have. It's been a really, really positive relationship. We use their skid loader to then turn their food scraps, leaves, wood chips, mix them really well, and then eventually load. And I do have some slides, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. So when that pile is mixed, we are always adding moisture. So I want to really emphasize that it's important to add that moisture when you're mixing your raw inputs together. Once we've made that mixture, the pile is very well mixed. All the inputs are on that concrete pad and mixed up together. The water has been applied to about 60%, but it's, passing the squeeze test. Then we will then load it into these modified shipping containers. The modified shipping containers are designed not only to be good dimensions for what a compost pile should be, but also they're designed so that we can push air underneath and through the pile. And I have some slides later on where I'll show you exactly how that works. So that mixture is then loaded into its bay, into its bin, and it will stay there for 4 weeks. Usually that pile is not going to be remixed. It's not going to be disturbed. It's getting sufficient air from the pipes and the blowers that are running through the pile. Excuse me. But there are times, if we do not make an adequate mix, that we will actually then have to go in, take the material out, remix it. So the idea is that if you do everything right up front on that first processing day, then that pile can stay in that container as long as it's getting forced aeration for 4 weeks. We will use, again, we'll use old compost or thermophilic compost on top of the pile. Now we do that as a way to cover up any of the food scraps that were in the original mix. We do not want pests and animals, birds, you name it, to know that there is food scraps in this pile. Now, the reality is animals are really smart. That's not to say that they do not know that there is material there, but we want to make it harder for them. We don't want there to just be exposed food scraps sticking out of the pile. So we want to cover it with something. We used to cover it with leaves. We used to cover it with wood chips, which sort of acts as a carbon cap. But what we thought about, and this was sort of Benny's thinking, was, well, if we cover it with a thermophilic compost, and whenever we water it from above, we're basically watering in that thermophilic, those thermophilic microorganisms into the pile. And so what we've used now moving forward is old compost, thermophilic compost that we put on top of the compost pile. So that way, when we do add water, if the pile is severely dry, then we'll water it from above, and any of that liquid is going to penetrate through that old compost and sort of keep on inoculating the pile down below. And that has worked very well. Also, adding leaves and wood chips, it is a good carbon cap, but again, it's going to change your carbon and nitrogen ratio. Whereas if you use older compost, it's got that same carbon to nitrogen ratio. It actually may have decreased, but it's not going to really change or skew the ratio moving forward in a detrimental way. So in these first 4 weeks, we are looking for our piles to get hot. It can take a few days, like I mentioned. The weather can impact how quickly the piles get hot. If we have weeks where it's below freezing, some of the piles, they just, they won't heat up. But really, it's not the outside ambient air that's creating the heat in the pile. It's the microorganisms. So if you've made a good pile with a good mix and you're able to blow air into that pile, the piles should heat up regardless of what the weather is. But I will say that this winter we did notice, and I think it was a colder winter than normal, our piles were taking a pretty long time to heat up. We've sort of passed that phase, and now our piles are back to being in this 120 to 150 range. But really our piles will sit between 130 and 140 in this range. And again, this is the first 4 weeks of what we call the primary phase of the composting process. Another thing I want to mention about the containers is that they do keep direct stormwater or rainwater from falling directly onto the piles. And so we can monitor and control our moisture levels better by having them be covered. So I talked about aeration and just kind of get into some of the specifics about how this aeration works. So these are really common for lots of different compost operations. A standard sort of either quarter horsepower, half horsepower, full horsepower blower. These blowers are usually used for inflatable bouncy houses or in front of car dealerships. If you see the things that move back and forth. That's typically what these blowers are used for. Sometimes people use them to sort of dry out their basement if there's a flood. Composters have adopted them and now utilize them to push air into their piles. So we use a 1 horsepower blower because our piles are fairly large. For smaller piles at like the Durwood site, a 1/4 horsepower or 1/2 horsepower blower is adequate when the pile is smaller. The blower is programmed automatically. So as I sit here at home, the compost piles are getting aerated on regular intervals. So it's really nice because once you load that material into the bay, it's automated. You know those piles are going to receive air. They turn on for at least 4 times per day, but we do have the ability to increase those. And if we're noticing that a pile is not, it's not following the normal trajectory, if we're testing it and it has high CO2, we will increase those intervals. Our system is completely off the grid. Our farm is completely off the electrical grid. We do not have any grid electricity. So in order to do this project, we had to install solar. And so our system runs off solar. And that also is why we have 4 intervals per day. Now, some sites which do have access to grid electricity will have more intervals per day, but we're limited to only when the sun is out. So this is just a view behind the containers showing how it works. That's that 1 horsepower blower connected to a pipe manifold on the left-hand side of the screen. On your right-hand side of the screen, that's showing you the bottom or the floor of the shipping container where the compost will be piled on top. So those holes that you see correspond with the pipes that run underneath of the container. Here's a little bit of information about the solar and how the solar was set up. And Benny had the idea of using a rainbird irrigation system for the blowers behind the bins. So everything is programmed in this rainbird irrigation system, which is usually used to power pumps to irrigate fields. But in our case, it's used to turn on blowers to blow air into piles. And this is where everything, you can see my beautiful handwriting of the time settings of when those blowers turn on and off. And that's just a visual reminder. That is all programmed into the system, and you can go and kind of look into it. I will say that this is a pretty sophisticated way of doing this. There are other ways that you can set your blowers on timers that work just as fine. But this is a nice way of doing it. The nice thing also about having the solar installed at our farm is that in addition to using it to turn the blowers on, we're also able to use it to charge power tools. I've even done presentations from this office space at the farm because I can charge my laptop and I can actually plug in Wi-Fi. So it's really been a huge addition to the farm, not just so that we can pump air into the piles, but also so that we have access to solar. So once that material goes through its first 4 weeks where it's getting regular air on a programmed interval, then it will be taken out. Again, this is going to be with the skid steer, and it's going to be loaded into a roll-off dumpster. This roll-off dumpster also has a pipe underneath. You can see in my image here that there's a pipe underneath the roll-off dumpster. We have another blower, a smaller blower, one that's only about, I think, a 1/2 horsepower, that we can put into this pipe, and then we can run air through the pile during its secondary phase. But the idea is at the 4-week mark, you may start to notice, well, your pile's gotten hot, but it's starting to go down a little bit. And at that point, it's really important to go in, take that pile out, and remix it. And what you'll notice is when you go in and remix it, it's actually going to heat up again. And that's because there's going to be parts of your pile that haven't really gone into that core zone of where the heat is generated. And so by remixing it, also by adding moisture for the microorganisms, what we notice is that the piles really take off in this second phase. We're not worried about piles getting too hot in the primary phase. And the secondary phase, we do have to monitor to make sure the piles don't get too hot. And so we are loading and unloading this material with the skid loader. So it's going to stay 4 weeks, about a month, in the shipping containers, the converted shipping containers, and then it's going to stay 4 weeks or about a month in the roll-off bin. So it's going to spend about 2 months, more or less, in the primary and secondary phase. And this is where, again, you're monitoring temperatures, you're making sure that the pile has adequate moisture content, you're making sure that, you know, you're sort of recording to make sure things are going according to plan. After that 2-month mark, in our case, because we just don't have enough space in this area, we take the material from secondary phase to its third phase, which is going to be its final phase. For us, this is a section of our farm that is unused, that we use for the finish, like sort of the finishing of the active composting, and also for curing. At this stage, we want to cover our piles. Actually, in the secondary phase too, we want to cover our piles because, again, you don't really want to have direct water, direct stormwater hitting these piles. You want to control your moisture content. You also don't want runoff. In our case, you know, we're making fairly large piles. We do not want stormwater hitting the piles and running off. So we want to be able to control that moisture content. So in this phase, at sort of the 2-month mark, your pile is still going to be active. It's still going to be hot. You're sticking a thermometer in there. You're still getting 130 degrees. You may even get a little bit more than that, right? The pile is still cooking. One of the things that we've realized may be contributing to prolonging our active phase is our use of wood chips. So bigger piles mean wood chips are more important because you want to make sure that there is porosity when you're pushing air through the pile. When you push the air through the pile, you want to make sure it's actually passing through the pile. Wood chips do a really good job of doing that by providing enough airspace for that air to pass. So we do utilize wood chips in our recipe. But you know, wood chips are the lignin that ties the wood chips, the wood together, takes a lot longer to break down. But at this phase, it does start to break down. I only mention that because that can sort of prolong your active composting time, but it's still important for the composting process. Now, at your 3 to 4 month mark, and you're turning the pile, and you're noticing, I'm turning this pile, but the pile's not reheating. That's an indication this pile is getting closer and closer to being ready. At our 4-month mark, a lot of our piles really are no longer generating heat. They may be about 100 degrees or so, but they're not in that thermophilic zone. At that stage, we've determined, okay, in a month, this material is going to be ready. So what we'll do is we'll set that material aside, and then that becomes our curing pile. Curing is a really important part of the compost process. You want to make sure that that pile has gone through at least a month of curing before it is field ready. We compost year round, which means that we have the ability to leave our compost in cure piles for as many as 2-3 months to really ensure that that material has broken down and that it's a good product. Not that that's necessary. I mean, it really only needs 1 month of curing. But, you know, the longer that it's sitting, there is still decomposition happening. It's not thermophilic microbes. At that point, it's mesophilic microbes. There's fungi that's present that's doing decomposition as well. If you have the ability to wait and be patient with your compost, I would highly recommend doing that because it's going to increase the value of the compost. 6 months is really just a very good, I think, marker. 6 months from when that pile was started to when you want to use it. If you're doing things in an appropriate, if you're managing the pile appropriately, it should be ready to roll at about that 6-month mark. If you're not pushing air, you're not turning, you're not watering, it's going to take a little bit longer. If you're being really meticulous, really careful about all the details, then you can achieve this quicker than 6 months. But yeah, this is sort of the final step. Our piles at this stage are going to be placed based on how old they are. Our oldest piles are going to be on the end, youngest piles closer to the area where the hot composting is occurring. And that's just a visual reminder, mental reminder of which piles are ready first. So we will then take the material from the cure pile, apply that, give more time to the rest of the material to break down. Once that cure pile has been completely used up, which is going to happen starting this month and next month for us. We will then move material in its place. That will be the cure section. And then we'll keep sort of going through that process to ensure that we are applying compost that is finished, compost that is no longer active, that is no longer thermophilic. This is a view of one of our finished compost piles at our farm. So this is the same farm where we do the composting. This is our Bladensburg farm. And this really has been a huge, huge benefit to our operation, because in years past, Eco has always been an organic farm, has always been a regenerative farm. But even though they were making compost, never making enough for all of the needs of the farm. So compost was being trucked in from offsite. At this stage, we are now making enough compost for our farm. And we know the entire life story of that compost. We know when it started. We know how hot it got, for how long it got, what was in the recipe, what the moisture content was, whether it was covered. And for us, it's really nice to have that on our own space. So we're super happy about being able to be self-sufficient with our compost. And this wouldn't be possible without the partners that we work with. I want to make that very clear. Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about worms, but I do want to mention that part of our material that goes through the hot compost process does get fed to our worms. About 5–10% of what goes through this sort of compost journey of first, second, third phase will be taken and fed to the worms. They will want the material that's still relatively active, that still has particles of food and things that they can eat. They're not as interested. I mean, they're really not interested in finished compost at all, because there's really nothing for them to eat at that point. They want the material that still has some yumminess to it. And so we'll feed about 5–10% at about that 3–4 week mark. So what you'll see here is, this is my colleague Dante. What we'll do is we'll take some wheelbarrows over to the hot compost pile, pitchfork, and fill up a couple wheelbarrows, take those wheelbarrows right next door into the worm house, toss this hot compost on top to the worms. Now the worms don't like hot compost, so we don't want to put too much on there. What we want is, we want to put a very thin layer on top of where the worms are active, and then immediately water it in to lower the temperature. And I've made the mistake of adding too much hot compost to the worms and have actually started thermophilic composting on top. I learned that was not the right way to do it. So moving forward, what we do is we add a very thin layer at a time, maybe 1–2 times a week, to the worms. They absolutely love this stuff. And the image, so that's the image I have in the middle, is our worm system with our red wigglers. We'll also feed them farm residues from the farm. So that's some chard and lettuce and things that have gone bad and didn't go to market. We'll feed them sort of a combination. And then we have our sifter, where we will sift out the compost material. So that's all I got as far as slides go. I'd love to take this time to talk about questions and leave some time for potential discussion and questions about the Durwood facility, but that's what I got.
Okay, Mr. Fazio, I'm Tina Burke, and I've accumulated a number of the questions from the chat and so forth. So I'll go ahead and get started, because you have quite a few.
Okay.
First off, how can one guarantee that rats don't have access to a small backyard compost operation? Folks in our community garden would like to do composting, but we have had rats.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that the Knox bin model is a really good model. So I'd encourage you to take a look at how those are designed with the hardware mesh cloth. It's a weird name, hardware cloth, but it's a mesh steel material that is used to put, and they're elevated, and that should prevent any rodents from easily burrowing in there. But another thing that you can be careful about, I would not recommend meats in backyard compost bins. That's not to say that rats are not going to be interested in other food sources as well, but they definitely are going to be interested in if you put meats in there. So I would avoid doing that to prevent rodent activity. Elevating it, using a steel cloth to prevent them from easily burrowing in and out. But it's a challenge. I mean, every urban composter I've talked to has had a challenge with this. So monitoring, if you notice that they're there, pausing, making sure your site is as clean as possible. So we do everything on a concrete pad. We thoroughly clean that concrete pad after we're done working there. So just make sure that there's not food scraps just hanging out. You want to make sure that those are in the center of the pile, if you can.
And in the past, many of us were told not to add any meats. However, one of the slides you did mention fish and seafood. So has that changed? And why the fish and seafood?
Yeah, so I think that the reason why meats are not recommended for compost has come from the home composter lens, so to speak. So if you are putting fish and meat in your backyard compost bin, it's going to, and it's not like a managed compost facility, and there's not someone there monitoring it every day, it could lead to rodents. Now, we do things professionally. There's nothing wrong with meat and fish in a compost pile. There are, actually, Benny's experience was in composting deceased livestock, so entire cows and pigs would go in compost piles. As far as rodents go, that would be where I would say to be careful. But fish, like actual fish, is one of the best nitrogen inputs you can use in a compost pile. So it really just depends on where you're composting, whether you have systems in place that can prevent rodents from getting in. If you are worried about rats, if you're in an urban space where there already are rats, meat and fish is probably not the best idea.
Okay, and on that same note, do eggshells break down completely?
Eventually, but it takes a very yeah. Eggshells are one of those things that you'll notice after 6 months. You'll notice a piece of an eggshell. A best practice would be to pulverize them, break them up, and then throw them in. If you're able to do that, because that is going to obviously expedite the decomposition. They're a great input. They have great nutritional value. But yeah, anything that has that hard shell on it is going to take longer.
Okay. Some residents are concerned that the Dickerson composting facility will produce methane gas if the county adds food scraps to that mix. Is that a legitimate worry?
So the reality is that site is so small. Those piles are so small. Will methane be produced during the process? Yes, it's going to be a very small amount. I think that the benefits of teaching people how to make compost and how to divert compost from landfills, which are the leading generator of methane, outweighs the minimal amount of methane that's going to be produced. So I personally, I don't think it's much of a thing to be concerned about, but that's my own opinion.
Okay. And then why do you not accept compostable plastic bags?
Yeah, okay. So the reality with compostable plastic, and this can be somewhat of a touchy subject, so I want to be careful about what I say here. I have learned compost from Benny Ayres, who I mentioned. One of the first conversations him and I ever had was about compostable plastics. At that point, I was in favor. He was not. I have made enough compost piles. I've worked with compost enough now to know that I don't want compostable plastics in my pile. And it's for a number of reasons. One, when compostable liners arrive to the site, they contain the food scraps. The idea of making a compost pile is mixing the food scraps with the leaves and wood chips, but they come in a liner. A compostable liner has a very hard job. It is designed to hold structure and break down. So how does that, it doesn't break down immediately when you want it to. It will eventually break down, but the material inside that liner is not being mixed with the carbon sources. So you're not really creating that appropriate carbon and nitrogen mix. The other problem that I have and that we have at the farm with compostable plastics is that BPI certified compostable plastics have been tested and certified to break down and turn into, break down enough to be considered compost. But there's a lot of materials out there that are not BPI certified that are green. They may have a tree on them. They may say eco something, something or another, but they're not BPI certified. And when you're going through 200, 250 households worth of food scraps, you cannot reasonably go in and check to make sure what is BPI certified, what is not. So beyond that, there are also BPI certified compostable plastics that take 4 months to break down. And if I'm looking to get a compost pile from start to finish in 3.5 months or 4 months, but a compostable K-cup takes 4 months and needs 165 degrees to break down, then I'm sacrificing the health of my pile for a piece of plastic. I know that there is value in using compostable liners. I'm not naive to that. It has brought a lot of people on to composting, and I think that that is important. So I'm not opposed to compostable liners. Compostable plastics, though, I think that we need to start thinking about, these are still single-use items. If they're not BPI certified, there's nothing regulating them that they actually break down. I am more in favor of using reusables whenever possible. Encouraging folks to take, responsibility for keeping their bins clean. The compostable liner, keeps the bin clean to a certain degree, but that's really its only purpose, is to keep the bin clean. So I encourage folks to, who have the ability to routinely spray out that bin, clean the bin themselves. I want to make clear, this is my opinion and the opinion of EcoCity Farms. I've had certain conversations about compostable plastics. I know that in some ways that they bring value. I want to just end by saying, for an on-farm facility that is practicing organic practices in a certified naturally grown manner, I would highly, highly suggest that compostable plastics are not included in the compost piles, and that's my view on it.
Okay. Can you speak to the difference in producing leaf mold as opposed to compost?
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, no, in a lot of ways it's easier. So you have one input as opposed to different, coming up with a recipe and this and that. It's not going to have quite the same nutritional value as creating compost with various different items. So a good finished compost has a nice blend of biology, so microorganisms and fungi, other sort of higher level nematodes, protozoa. The more diverse your mix is, the more diversity there is going to be in your finished microorganism or fungal count, so to speak, which you'll get when you add different inputs in. But so I live in Hyattsville now. I grew up in College Park. My dad always ordered leaf mulch, or leaf, really it's leaf compost from College Park, and it's a really, really good product. I mean, it's not necessarily going to have as much punch, so to speak, as something that has food scraps in it. But for just adding organic matter into your soil, it's actually a very, very good product. And I think the same would go for what's being made at the Montgomery County facility as well. So again, yeah, sorry.
If you were making it at home, would you be stirring it as often? Would you be going through the same steps?
Yeah, so you would still want to mix it. You'd still want to provide water. So you would really follow a lot of the same steps. The only thing that would really be different would be that feedstock recipe, because everything's already built in. And leaves are great because leaves have a good starting carbon to nitrogen ratio already baked in. And that's why some facilities just do leaf composting. But as far as the turning and adding water and monitoring moisture, that would be consistent for leaf composting as well. And pile size, I would say, is also going to be consistent.
Okay. Would you comment on why compost is called a soil amendment rather than being considered a soil nutrient? Is it possible for home composters to get or do a nutrient analysis of their compost?
So I don't think there's anything wrong with calling compost a soil nutrient. I mean, that's what it is. It is adding, nutrient content, right? Positive. It is doing that, but it's not only doing that. And I think the reason why amendment may be a better term is because when you're adding compost to your soil, part of it is to give nutrients to your plants, but it's also going to control the water holding capacity of your soil. So if you have sandy soil in particular, which does a very poor job of retaining moisture, then adding compost, you might just add compost not for the nutritional value or anything like that, but so that that soil starts to create a loam and it acts like a sponge. So I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it that. I just think that it does more than just the nutrients, and that's, I think, why soil amendment is often used.
Okay. And is it possible for home composters to get the nutrient analysis?
It is, yeah. So we use Penn State Extension. We test our compost pretty regularly. All you do, you basically take a representative sample of your finished compost. I mean, it actually doesn't have to be your finished compost. It could be, I think they would sample your feedstock mix, but Penn State is a good extension agency. They'll tell you things like pH value, moisture content, and then the different, phosphorus, potassium. You can even get heavy metal testing if you're worried about potential heavy metals. So I would suggest Penn State. We've really liked working with them. I think Delaware Extension also has a compost testing laboratory as well.
Okay. What paper products are okay?
So I would limit it to unbleached, unlined cardboard products. So if you like, really what a traditional cardboard box looks like, a brown cardboard box, minimal sort of black ink. I mean, I'm not super knowledgeable on this, so I want to be careful about what I say, but I think that is okay. You definitely don't want to be adding in cardboard that has plastic lining on it. You don't want to add in cardboard that still has its tape on it. Obviously, that's not going to break down. And then I would say beyond that, paper towels and things like that are used to clean up a food spill are going to be fine, as long as they're sort of like unbleached. The more natural, the better. I would avoid tossing. I mean, definitely don't put anything in that has a wax plastic lining. So ice cream containers are one that should not be going in a compost pile. Like Chinese food takeout that has that wax lining, don't throw that in the compost pile. If it looks and it feels, like natural paper and cardboard, then that should be okay.
Okay. And how often do you add new inputs before you start a new pile? Maybe for small residential.
Okay, yeah. So I got it. And that I think is one of the challenges of doing hard home composting. But what I would recommend, if possible, is instead of always adding in new inputs into the compost pile you've always made, to do either two things. One, have some 5-gallon buckets with a twist top lid or a nice secure lid and stockpile your food scraps until you get to a point where you have enough to make a new pile. There's one way of doing it. Or you could be sort of meticulous and careful about how often you're moving your pile. So leaving yourself, a 3-bin system space or a 4-bin system space to move that material over so that you're not always adding in new food to your to your old pile. But the same thing with sort of stockpiling food scraps when you have it available. I would say definitely do that with leaves as well. We only get leaves one time a year. It's always sort of a mad dash that time of year because we want to make sure that we stockpile enough leaves to get us through to the next fall. So do that as well. I would recommend if you have access to wood chips, sort of stockpiling the wood chips. And yeah, just keep things in containers so that you can make you can do those measurements precisely when you're making your new pile. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, and the final question I think we have is dealing with invasive plants, lesser celandine, Japanese silkgrass, roundleaf greenbrier, and on and on. Is there any possibility for them? I know you mentioned brush piles as well as composting, so where should we go with this?
Yeah, it's a great point. For the most part, we avoid taking any weeds and we avoid putting them in our compost pile. I think for the most part, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but I do think for the most part, high temperatures are going to kill off the viability of most weeds. But we sort of operate on the better safe than sorry, line of thinking, which is, even if high temperatures do kill off the root systems or the seeds that could, propagate these plants, they may not get to that center of the core. They may always stay on the outside. You can't always make sure that that's going to be mixed into the center. So my recommendation is better safe than sorry. But yeah, I just don't have a great answer to whether or not they would die in the pile. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I did get one last question. Can you use shredded paper as the brown part of your compost?
Yeah, you sure can. I mean, yeah, shredded paper, again, as long as it's that sort of clean, unbleached, not taped material, you can shred that up and use it as your carbon source. I would probably recommend not only using that. I would use that with maybe leaves and wood chips. So using that calculator I talked about to sort of come up with a good recipe. But yeah, shredded paper is fine.
Okay, thank you very much. It's been very informative. And Steve, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Tony. Thanks for your presentation. I hope you don't mind calling you Tony. I think when I see your name. So great job.
Thank you.
I want to wrap things up for you guys. Again, there's going to be some changes in the procurement system. Try to do my best to accommodate you guys, get you the materials you need when you need them. I'm working on that. I'm working on our audit here today. So hopefully the weather's going to get a little warmer here in the next few days, and everyone gets a chance to get outside and work in the garden, spread some compost. So anybody have a good rest of the day, and I hope to see some of you soon. I'm going to be here till 3 o'clock. If anybody's nearby and wants to pick up their marketing materials, I'll be here also on Monday afternoon again if you need to pick up your marketing materials, and of course the day of our board meeting too. So if you need to get your marketing materials, they're here, and I'll wrap things up, and I hope to see you guys soon.
Okay.
All right, thanks everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, tech team and all.
Steve, we had 147 participants and people stuck in through the whole meeting.
That's great. That's great to hear. Wonderful. Awesome. 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 Thanks, everyone.